we are good to go.
Good afternoon once again. And how are we? Maybe 10 minutes will make a difference. How are we now? Thank you. Yes, that is the response we were looking for. Good afternoon once again, and welcome. Thank you for taking time this afternoon, going into the evening on a Friday. On a Friday, you chose to be here. So, thank you so much. And because of time, I won't go long with my intro and just welcoming everyone. I just wanted to know that you are welcome. Before we start with the program, I just want to get admin out of the way. So the door that we are using is the door at the back. And toilet. Toilets, you exit the door and you come this side. So you come this side, you exit the door. Toilets at this side, you'll see the sign. It is here. Then, yes, are there anything I'm leaving out? No, that's all. So this side, you exit the door, and you come this side. Thank you. That is all the admin that I have for now. And we have Caesar, who will come and do our welcoming and opening for this session. But as we all know, we are here today to review a phenomenal book, and I really hope that we will be able to capture it in 2 hours. Reading and going through it, there's a lot to talk about. I don't know how we are going to do that in 2 hours, but the panelists are here, and we will try our best to capture as best as possible what the author, Ellen Kuzwayo, was writing in that book. And the main purpose of today is for us to engage with one another regarding this book, but also drawing lessons from the book. So drawing lessons from the book, what we can take as this generation, as this group of people. What can we learn and what can we take from women? This book, it covers women all the way. The stories start from the early 1910s all the way to the late 1970s. That is many years of lessons and many women and many other stories. Even men are mentioned in the book, so you won't be excluded. But the point here is to learn what can we draw, lessons we can draw from this particular book. And secondly to that, it was also just to encourage us as a community, to encourage reading. We need to go back to the culture of reading. There is a huge difference in memory retention when you are watching online and when you are actually reading something on paper. The retention is way longer. It is much longer than when you are listening to something. So it's also just to encourage us to build this culture and keep this going. So we have our book clubs regularly, and there are some regular faces here, and we have these regularly. We'd like to encourage everyone that let this not be it might be your first time, but let it not be your last time. And with that being said, I would like to welcome Caesar to come and do welcoming and opening for us. Then we will continue with our program.
Thank you for being here. I think my job is to give the purpose of this session. But yeah, well, let me start by saying, Amanda. Just introduce my name is Lerato. I am currently reading or organizing this book for Mantombi School of Leadership. I think, like I just said, there are familiar faces. I know there are people from moving schools here as well, which I think I must say we really appreciate your contribution, and also just making sure that you attend these meetings. Please just make sure that you also just let other people know that they can be members of. Did you know you can be a member for Moving Spirits Book Club and be a member for Lerato School of Leadership Book Club? So if you haven't registered in our website, please do so you can be in our database, so that when you share, whether we're sharing our newsletters, other information within the book club, you're also aware of. Well, the purpose of the session today is to firstly like Lerato said, I think she just took words out of my mouth. This is just to encourage and promote the culture of reading. But most importantly, the reason why we chose this book, Call Me Woman by Ellen Kuzwayo, it's simply because it takes us back to understanding. I feel like the book itself is not just focusing on her life story, but it also just encompasses some of the things, maybe vividly, not even everything, because we can't really know everything that happened in the past, but at least we can be able to like understand and draw from whatever information that people from the past, especially women, because this is women's life. So particularly this book was chosen, or I chose it simply because I wanted us to start the Women's Month with reading a book from one of our, you know, powerful historian who's able to just share her life on it and also just maybe even share other people's life stories. I think if you have a grandmother at home or somebody who has been there during their parenting time, they can be able to just also just share a little bit of their stories here and there, because it may seem like they have a different story, but when you read the book, you'll see that actually these people might have gone through the same thing. So yeah, without further ado, I'm just gonna get back to our facilitator. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much for that. And please, when I started, keep it melancholic. I want us to warm up. I want us to warm up because the purpose is for us to be it's an interactive session. So please feel free. Please, feel free, even free, and let us have a good session this afternoon. Let us have a good session this afternoon. And thank you very much for that, Caesar, and also giving us the reason why we did this book for this month. And without further ado, I would like to welcome our lovely, lovely panelists this afternoon. We'll start the Puleng. Puleng Segalo, you can choose wherever you prefer to sit. Then we have Mantombi. You can also come forward and also choose where to sit. We have our third panelist. She's always on the way. There was an accident, so traffic jam, but she is on the way and she will be covering part 3. So how this book is structured, it is structured in 3 parts. It's divided into 3 parts. And I am aware that as we are sitting here, there are a few of us who haven't read the book. So the way we structured this session, we are going to first start with the panelists giving us a reflection on the part that they were assigned. So we will start with part 1, a reflection there on what the part was addressing and what the book said in that regard. Then we go to part 2, then we will finish with part 3. Then after the parts have been presented, this is so that we are all on the same page on what the book is about and what the book covers. So after we have received those parts, reflection on those parts, we will then go in and we will now start to engage. And I would like to encourage us that as you're listening to the different parts and different sections of the book, take note of a few questions and points of engagement and what stood out for you. So that after that, we can come back and talk about that. We will open up the floor and it will be free for everybody to comment and participate. But for now, we're going to start by introducing our panelists. I'll take a seat right here. I'll give our panelists a moment, 2 minutes, 2 minutes each. 2 minutes each to give a brief intro of who they are. And interestingly enough, ladies and gentlemen, as the Oratambo School, we recently appointed our new board, and these are board members of Oratambo School, so we are really honored. Really honored to have them here, and the reason why they were shortlisted actually ended up on the board is the expertise that they carry, the different expertise that they carry and that they have and that they will bring to the school. So they're not here as guests. In fact, they're here as It's their home. It's their home, and we are really honored to have you on the panel. But we are also honored and excited to be sharing this experience together. So I will give you then 2 minutes so that we can get to the juice. 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. As has been indicated, my name is Puleng, and indeed we are also honored to be here. We've recently been appointed as members of the board of directors for the OR Tamil School, and we're really looking forward to contributing, to sharing, and to making a mark in ensuring that the work of the school is what it's supposed to be strategically. So I am based in Pretoria. I work my discipline, my field, my specialization is in psychology. So I work there as a professor of psychology. But at the moment, the position that I'm holding is the Chief Ndlovu Research Chair. A space really that is meant to honor the legacy and the ethos of Ndlovu and what he stood for, and how can we use that within our communities and in academia to rethink where we are as a people and as a nation. So I'm very delighted to be here. I'm not sure how extensive one should go in terms of the work that we do, but as I've indicated, my work is in psychology and also in gender studies. So I'm very delighted and looking forward to the engagement with all of you this afternoon.
Yeah, so my name is Mantombi, and I was telling Lerato earlier that it's always very difficult, when someone says introduce yourself, I always find it very difficult to speak about myself. Yeah. So I'm going to keep it very brief. I am a literacy activist based in Soweto. I am a comrade. I think most people that are here are comrades. Manta. Yeah, and then professionally, I am an internal auditor, but very rooted in the community. I believe that I'm just like part of everyone who is fighting for social justice in the community. So yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. And like I said, you really prepared the quality that we have here, and it's very exciting I'm very excited to hear the perspectives that we have, because it's 2 different backgrounds, 2 different disciplines, professions. So I'm quite excited for our engagement. And just on time, we have our third panelist to just arrive. With Alu, if you could join us here, and we'll also give her a warm round of applause. Warm round of applause, and we're just going to give you 2 minutes. I'm sorry, I know that. 2 minutes, if you could just introduce yourself to everyone, and yeah, 2 minutes. Anything and everything.
Good afternoon, I think. I apologize for my name coming. I was from Mabuza, very happy. My name is Aluwani. I am an activist, part of the movement. I currently work as a housing enterprise propeller. They are a SME development agency of housing provincial government. And yes, I'm an activist.
Welcome and thank you, welcome and thank you. In the words of Ndlovu, why do you miss you? We are going to have a good time this afternoon. And just so that you're also in the loop, I explained the structure that we're going to begin by part 1. We're going to start part 1, part 2, then we come to part 3, giving a reflection and a summary of what the part covered. Then from there, we will start engaging and have conversation with everyone around it. So we will start with you, Puleng, with part one. Just your reflections, your highlights, and what you drew from that particular part. And also for someone who hasn't read the book, giving clarity on what the book is about in part one. Okay.
Thank you so much. And thank you for choosing this book for us to discuss today as we start Women's Month, as we start reflecting on the contributions of our grandmothers, our mothers, those who came before, to our liberation and the struggles that they went through for all of us to be here today. And Ellen Kuzwayo is one such woman. She contributed to this. And I think it's by way of background, because I think that the first part of the book really gives an overview. So she provides a landscape, if you will, before she goes into details, which I think is very helpful. Her story is the story also of South Africa. Her story is the story of what colonialism has done to us as people in South Africa. Her story is also that of apartheid and what it has done to us as a people. But her story is also a reflection of 1994 and then what came after 1994. So I think it's a brilliant overview of the different epochs that we've gone through as a people in South Africa. Born in 1914, during the time of colonialism. So she lived through that time, and then she lived through seeing changes in 1948 in South Africa, and she lived until 2006. So you can see that long history and the experiences that she would have and the reflections that she then offers in the book about her life. So one of the main things that the section covers or it speaks to is what happened a year before she was born, which was 1913, when the land dispossession, the Land Act happened. And so as you can imagine, she was only 1 year when this happened, but then as she grew up, she got to see the effect and the impact of what this law did. So land dispossession happens in 1913 in South Africa, and she grows up in Soweto. And this is very important because Soweto is very central again to our history. And she offers an overview of life in Soweto and what that was like. And with land dispossession, we also hear about what that did to the African family, to our families. And then it brings in the challenge of family disintegration. So we have Johannesburg, we have the Witwatersrand, the mining happens, there's minerals that are being mined, and who has to work? So the work of migrancy also then starts. Who has to work and dig up these minerals? It's the African men, it's the African people. But how do they then come to do this work? It means they have to leave their families. It means they have to leave their villages to come into this space to do this work. And she says, when we look at this work, we need to understand it in context, because it means there are women who are left behind. There are children who are left without their fathers. So even those who were not interested in working in the mine, the system made it so that they do not have a choice. So when the system imposes the tax laws to say, no, you have to pay tax, people say, okay, I've got chickens, I've got cows, but then the system says, no, we want money. How do you get money? You have to work. Where do you work in your community, in your rural village? There's nowhere to work for you to have money. Then it means you have to leave your family to go and look for work. And then men go into the mines and they work, and they have to make a living, to start a life. And this is how then, the townships, the small communities start as well. And she has to look after the children, she has to look after the family, she has to make meals to be the breadwinner for the family, the absence of the father. But then some women also then follow, because you want to know where your husband is, you want to know where the father of your children is. And then many women start coming into these spaces as well. And families start. But what she explains in the book also is that when these spaces get formed, when the townships get formed, again with the restrictions in terms of movement, this is when the moral values of African society start also to be affected. Because people are just trying to survive, they're trying to make a living. Abu Baba are in their minds during the week, over the weekend, they need spaces to go to, they need to engage and build a community. And this is where now people start a different kind of lifestyle, which is very different from what you get in the communities. So she says it's important for us to look at this not only at face value, but to look at this in the context of how the apartheid system actually created this way of living, and how this also affected the children as well. That when 1948 happened, then the Bantu education system was also introduced. But the challenges that people have in the African communities is that the resources for the African child to be educated were insufficient. So you find teachers in Soweto. So she lived in Pimville, and so she gives that overview through a lens of having lived in Soweto herself, and say living in Pimville, looking at the different sections of Soweto, it's important to understand how all of these different sections came to be and how different people ended up where they lived. So for the African child, she argues that because the resources were not there, apartheid said that the African people can only learn up to a point because they are inferior. So we'll be wasting money if we put money for them to be educated. And it meant also the classes that are overcrowded. And she speaks about how the teachers in Soweto, the classes were overcrowded, and the imposition of Afrikaans as well. So she makes reference to 1976 in this context. And I'm hoping that as we're hearing this, we hear the different moments of South Africa, and we hear the different moments where shifts were happening. And she's talking about her life, but through her life, she's also talking about the history of South Africa. Some of the things that we often don't hear about is also how women were domestic workers and how they were not protected in any way. And when they grow older, I wonder how many of us think about this, because many of them lived in the back room somewhere. They would go home over the weekend or after however month, and then the relatives are looking after your children. But to Mama, when she gets older, what happens? Right? Do we ever think about that? So, and so she explains that they had this bridge or this in-between space where they say, no, we're going to put them at a camp somewhere, and your missus will come and look after you later. So she's elderly, there's no pension, there's no health care. And so when she got the opportunity, she was a teacher, she was also a social worker. So she got to work with people in the community to be able to understand how she can help her people. So she worked with people also like Abomama Matikizela Mandela. And the story is very painful, because she says when she goes to these camps, these places where women were put, some of them are saying, no, Mrs. said she's going to come back for me. I've been waiting for 6 months, I've been waiting for 2 years, and some of them end up even dying. So just the lie and the brutality of it, that women would die very sad, expecting and with hope for something that never happened. So what does that do to an African family? And so these are the things that she then covers in the book. And she speaks about the moral conundrum, that when we say we're having moral decay, as a country, as a people, can we really blame the society when the system was structured in such a way that people's culture and people's way of being was relegated to the side intentionally by the system itself? And she says, who is robbing whom in this country? So when we say there's a lot of crime that is happening in South Africa, yes, there is a lot of crime, but do we ever stop to ask, why is there so much crime in the country? And she says it's because of institutionalized crime. When the land was stolen in 1913, do we ever say, but that was crime, because that was a criminal activity? When people's livestock were taken, that was a crime. So it was legalized, and so it was institutionalized. So we don't look at it as crime. But when people are stealing so that they can survive, because there's no food at home, we say they're criminals, it's a crime. And so she says in her older years, when she reflects and she looks at the television, she looks at what's happening in society. And this is a very interesting point, because it got me thinking. She says, when I see or I hear that somebody has committed a crime, I actually somewhere quietly think to myself, I hope they don't get caught. I find myself thinking that, because I understand the circumstances that people are living in and what's pushing them to commit crime. Not that I'm condoning it and I'm saying it's right, and I also understand why it happens, because we only focus on that micro level of somebody stealing bread at ShopRite, but we don't think about how the institutions are stealing, and we don't pay attention to that. So she says, I can forgive at that level. And as I move towards also conclusion, she says that we need to listen to people's voices and not think on people's behalf. And she gives an example of Abu Mama who was selling in the street. And she says sometimes there are those philanthropists who would say, no, Abu Mama, but she's it's so hot and they're selling tomatoes at the street corner. We must build shelters for them. And she says, but have you taken a moment to go and sit down with the mama and ask her, are you okay sitting here? What would you like to see differently? Would it make sense for us to build shelter for you so that you can all be together in the same space? Because when you do that, then you will understand and put in place systems that are making sense for people. So when she was working as a social worker, she did that work of talking to Abu Mama, and they actually explained that no, actually we are fine where we are, and they gave reasons why that is the case and why it works for them in terms of convenience, in terms of time, in terms of accessibility, and how some of these controlled spaces have got hidden costs that are there that are often not talked about when you are given the space, but after a while you're not going to pay rent, you must do this. There are these rules that make it difficult for people to sustain their businesses. And in addition to the institutionalized crime, she speaks about institutionalized violence, how the system has been very violent. And if you're living in a country or under a system that is violent, that is going to give birth to a violent nation. We are deemed in South Africa as a violent nation. We are the most violent nation in the world. But we don't often engage as to why we are a violent nation, how apartheid created people who are wounded, who are now today filled with a lot of anger, a lot of anxiety, and how that system that was violent has created a violent nation. So if we want to heal as a nation, we need to acknowledge those things and create spaces for that healing to happen and understand why people are violent, and not just look at the statistics and say, we are a violent nation. And so this is what she leaves us with, and this is what she is requesting from us in terms of the work that we need to do as this generation, as the next generation. And she says, hunger knows no laws. When people are hungry, they will do whatever is necessary for them to eat. If you've got 3 children that you have to feed at home, you're going to do what is necessary for you to be able to feed those children. So we should not be quick to judge those who commit crime too harshly, and that we should understand the circumstances first. And as I then close, in the introduction, Ndlovu Magona suggests and encourages us to have this book as compulsory for our schools, because through Ma'am Ellen Kuzwayo's story, we learn about the history of South Africa. So what is there in the curriculum of our history books in the schools today? So when we read these stories through the lenses of those who lived in those times, then we also get to learn about the history of South Africa. So that is the overview in terms of what the first part of the book offers. So I think I shall pause here. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that. I think you captured that so fully and so thoroughly. As I was reading it, one thing that really stood out in that chapter was perspective. So when we learn, so I will speak on this particular where she spoke about, yes, the men left the home, then the women also started coming to the city. They started coming for work. Then you get your domestic work that was also there. However, she mentioned that not everybody could be absorbed in that. And she goes in to speak about,
Shipping queens.
Yes. And me as my little Christian girl, I am so against them. However, it was the first time reading literature that made so contextual sense. How women of that time actually, and this book was phenomenal. Women of that time saw a gap in the market, and the gap was Black men were not allowed to go buy in liquor stores. It was prohibited. Then that started. It's women who recognized that, no, we can close this gap. Women started opening up these shoppies, and not just Mkomboti. They had variety. There was gin. They were making this. There was gin. There was some level of vodka. There was, and the beauty of Black women in this country, that they saw a gap in the market, number one, and number two, they didn't do the bare minimum of what they were used to from back home. They even explored different varieties. Innovation. I have never understood the story of alcohol and Black women the way I did. The economic emancipation behind it. I think for me, that was so eye-opening. And she phenomenally explained it. It was so good to read. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yes. Then now we will go to our second part, where she goes back home and we learn about her from a very, very, very young age and her family and everything else. Now don't get over to you.
Thank you. I think this is I'm sure. I'm not sure if I want to hold it. I think I'm audible. Am I audible enough?
Yeah.
Imagine I'm saying I'm not sure that I can hear you.
You can speak.
Okay. So I think your reflections are quite thorough. You know, my part was on part 2, but just quickly, you know, in one of the chapters, Ellen says, when she's speaking about a film that she was part of, and she says, the film absorbed me completely, physically, intellectually, and emotionally. And in those words, I think her book captured me completely, or absorbed me completely from the start of the book all the way to the end. Not so much physically, but more intellectually and emotionally, you know. The book is not just an account about her life, but it encompasses South African history. She speaks about the role of community leaders around her. She speaks about the role of women. And I think in one of the chapters, she speaks so fondly of Comrade Lindiwe Mtinto. She speaks fondly of Mam Charlotte Maxeke, President Charlotte Maxeke. She speaks fondly of Comrade Winnie Madikizela Mandela. So it's such a lovely book. But I had to do reflections on part 2, which I think was very unfair, Lerato, and you know why. So, without giving too much spoilers on part 2, we're going to start with chapter 4. Ellen takes us through how her family was forcefully removed from their farm in 1974. On page 76, she says, authorities declared the area a black spot, which did not necessarily mean we would see black people must live there, but it just meant that black people could not own land in that area. So her family, like many black people during those years, were stripped of not only their physical homes, but also their identity, And as I read this part of the book, I was reminded of the video I once saw of an activist detailing, she was speaking about these forced removals. And this activist is from Sofia Town. I don't know if you know the story of Sofia Town. Or how they were removed via, she's speaking about them being removed from Sofia Town to Middleland. Do you guys know the song? Do you know the context? So I was reminded actually of the video as I was reading that part of her detailing how her family was forcefully removed. So I concur with you, Comrade Puleng, Uguti. The damage of these forced removals that it did to Black people in South Africa is very huge. A number of scholars have written about Black South African people. A number of scholars have written about Black South Africans having what they refer to as an identity crisis, which I think is the legacy of apartheid, right? So throughout this chapter, we're still on chapter 4, throughout this chapter, we're taken through the way of life in Tabanchu. On page 80, she says, any adult could instruct any child, meaning the responsibility of raising a child was not just of the family or parent, but one of the community they lived in. We all know of the proverb, it takes a village, the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. This is a proverb that emphasizes collectiveness in raising umntwana elokishini, right? And a typical example of how I was raised in Lukshina, I remember growing up in Soweto. Mawudlula, abantu abadala babekhoneni. That was such a grave affair, And I think for me, that is how these smallanyana African values, shaped who we became, But more and more in Minyaga, in Milobihamba, we see that the adoption of Western culture then erases our African values that one made us a united people, right? So in chapter 5, she takes us through, she goes to boarding school. She takes us through the loss of her mother, Mama Kashona. On page 99, she says, in the 1920s, girls were scared to do science, not because they were not capable to do science, but because they were told over and over that they had no aptitude for the field, which I think is still the case. The saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same. On chapter 6, it's quite a short chapter. But she speaks about her further education. She speaks about the difference between Bantu education and missionary education. And she says, well, at least according to the book, that missionary education seemed to have been way better than Bantu education, right? So on chapter 7, chapter 7 begins with Ellen taking us through the experience of attending the National Council of African Women. She speaks about the great President Charlotte Maxeke, her meeting Charlotte Maxeke, not personally though, but she quotes, part of his speech, Saga President Charlotte Maxeke, and I think maybe I should read it quickly, if you want, Lerato. If I'm allowed. I think I said it's on page 118 of the book. So this is what she quotes. This was the speech Saga President Charlotte at the national. Okay, so she says, I want to thank you all. This is Charlotte, right? She says, I want to thank you very much and congratulate you on your excellent deliberations. This work is not for yourselves. Kill that spirit of self and do not live above your people, but live with them. If you can rise, bring someone with you. Do away with the fearful animal of jealousy. Kill that spirit and love one another as brothers and sisters. The other animal that will tear us to pieces is tribalism. I saw the shadow of it, and it should cease to be. Now, the quote for me captures President Charlotte Maxeke's selflessness and collective leadership, and the importance of lifting one another, particularly as women, and she speaks about something that I think is still an animal. She refers to tribalism as an animal, which I think is still the case. One of the legacies of colonialism and apartheid are tribalism, right? We've seen this animal, the Comrade Charlotte, get entrenched in our society. What is even disturbing for me is that we are seeing a growing support of political parties that mobilize along those ethnic and tribal lines, which I think is a big problem. I mean, in the ANC, we continue to mobilize along tribal lines, meaning in essence, we're becoming an even more divided society. It's unfortunate that politicians have certain politicians have taken advantage of this and have amassed a lot of support because of these divisions. And these are things that Mom Charlotte spoke about years back, And then I want to read page 119 just quickly. Sorry. Okay, so it's page 119. Even in those years, tribalism was recognized as a danger by the Black community. It was no coincidence that the leadership of the Black people in those days was consciously chosen on the basis of merit and not ethnicity. An evil which has come with the national government regime. I suppose it is used as the instrument to divide and rule Black people. I think we're still seeing this animal, this cancer. So in chapter 7 and 8, I think was more painful, was more of a personal reflection of her life. But first in chapter 7, she speaks about her being forcefully. So I don't want to give away too much of the book, but Mama Ellen dies, she lives with the stepfather, and then the stepfather remarries along the way. So in chapter 7, she speaks about her losing that home, the stepmother literally kicking her out of the house, and the stepfather not really protecting her. And she's told to say, "Hambo kuna ubabako," a father that never raised her, a father that she never knew, but now she's forced to go, and that's how she goes to Soweto, right? And she's later then forced to live with her father, just to fast track and fast forward, not to give too many spoilers. But I think that was just a painful reflection of how she loses a home that she knew, family that she knew, people that she thought were part of her. And she speaks about how she felt rejected, and she didn't know how to. And this rejection goes on. The effects of that, or the impact of that incident in her life, is you see it throughout. She's then forced to live with her father for the first time. What is interesting for me is the type of person her real father is in Soweto. She moved to a kingpin. The type of father the type of person that Babake is. And on page 31 of the book, she says her father was more of a civic leader than a political leader. And she says back then, there was a clear distinction. The distinction is not so clear now. I think the lines between civic leaders and political leaders are quite blurry, And one of the many reasons for this, of course, is the increased politicization of civic issues. You are comrades yourselves, you know what I'm talking about, most of you, right? We're seeing more civic movements engaging in political advocacy. This, of course, has its pros and cons. Some people may say this is how it's supposed to be, but maybe not. Chapter 9 then details her first marriage, which I'm not going to talk about, which I think is also another painful account. So a marriage that didn't go well, and she just speaks about it. And then she remarries later with someone else, and she finds love again in Soweto. I think I want to stop there with my reflection, Lerato. I think when we engage, then we'll continue with the rest of the chapter.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. And it's unfortunate that you're shying away from touching the topic of the first husband. And I must admit, I cried reading that chapter. I cried. I think it was 2 chapters about her first marriage. And yeah, and the reason why it brought me to tears, I was in the literal tears, is because history repeats itself. I think you mentioned it, that till this day in this country, women in their own homes are victims. And the reason why it made me cry is because this book is beautifully written. So her penmanship from the beginning, throughout the whole book, excellent. However, when it gets to those chapters, there's I don't want to say lifelessness, but you could really feel how heavy that was for her. She herself even actually says on the book that she can't. She can't.
Yeah.
You can feel that the penmanship is no longer the same. There was a lifelessness there, and I think that just represents an unfortunate reality of Black women in this country. An excellent woman of her caliber, she was an activist, active in her community, and in those 2 chapters, you see that there was no life. She even said it herself that she felt as though she needed to save herself. It was lifeless. And it's unfortunate because that is the reality of women till this day. There's a specific part which for me uplifted me. And I know it's quite controversial when she says, there's a part where she says that I knew I needed to, throughout the chapter, she keeps repeating, I need to save myself for my children, I need to save my children. There's a part though where she says, I need to save myself for myself. I'm like, amen. The contradiction comes with, as Black women, we have always been we are something to someone. So
Yeah,
we
selfless.
have there's a selflessness that is required and demanded from us. And those moments of selfishness, I don't even think it's selfish. I think it's self-care and self-preservation. They often not encouraged among Black women. So I think for me, Lara had a deep appreciation for her herself writing it, coming to the realization that I need to save myself for myself. So I would want us to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
When we come back, I think it is something we need to talk about. GBV stats are ridiculous.
Yeah.
We cannot jump over it, but we'll come back to it. Discussion. Now we will go to our last and final part with you, Abby. If you could just take us through it.
I hope I'm audible. I'm told I have a soft voice. I wish I could be from you. So with part 3, we then come across an Ellen Kuzwayo, who's a walking contradiction of what she is. She's just released from prison and she does not want to participate in anything. Of course, you grow up in a community and because you are not a better Black per se, but because you are more informed of how processes work, how they unfold, members of the community religiously come to her asking for assistance with applying for maybe social welfare, assisting with rent, buying electricity, making appointments for them. And she gets to a point where she doesn't want to do that anymore, right? She's tired so much that in fact she was even busy with the book at the time. To a point where she went to us to say, please give me a classroom or an office where I can write this book and just focus on writing this book and myself and not the demands of community. She's then granted an office and then he gets a job there. And then there is a certain Ernest Wenzel, he's a lawyer at the time, that then writes to her to say, I need to meet with you. She ignores it. After a while, he writes again to say, I genuinely and really need to have a meeting with you. So she's like, okay, I don't know what this man wants to do. It's fine, let me go to his office. He gets there, and then he says, there's no one else I could have written to. You understand best the conditions that are faced by Black families in townships. So I have a case of young boys, I think one girl, who are 10 boys and one girl. Of course, the family system will say they did this, and that, but of course they will also actively. And then he says to her, if you don't assist these children, unfortunately, they are going to go to prison. And I'm afraid that they're going to get life sentences. And she's also at a point of saying, what does this have to do with you? Right? And it's fair. It's fair because she's just come out of prison and social confinement at some point, and there's no life, as I was saying, there's no life in her, right? And he never insists to say, you are the only one who can give them a fighting chance. And then she says, but anyway, with my infection. So he, Ernest Wenzel then says, okay, no, she says first to Ernest, look, I've just been released from prison myself. And I think me representing them or speaking of them to the judge on the day is going to disadvantage them. They see that the system sees me as a prisoner, as a criminal, and as a terrorist. So there's no benefit that I'm going to have. So, and then he says, okay, let's give it a chance. If it fails, we will fail having tried. So, fine, she then agrees, but the weeks leading up to the day of the court, she's questioning herself to say, how would I do that? Why would I eventually agree when I know I'm not in a position to convict them? And then it's now the day of the court, whereby the court is delayed. She goes into a room full of advocates, trying to find out what's going on, what's happening, what's going to happen.
They meet her at the door to say, no, we'll see you inside. They're confident. Says, okay, why are these people confident? But she walks inside the courtroom, and she also comes across parents of these children. They seem calm and composed. I think there's a greater theme of her being shocked at the calmness and the composure of Black women at the time, when every odds is stacked against them. It then gets to a point where she has to give a testimony of Black life in township South Africa. She then gives an account to say, of course, these children are born with every odd against them. And for them to revolt is something that I myself have done. And then there's another judge, another prosecutor that wants to intervene. Of course, patriarchy has been the theme of the book as well. The judge says, no, don't worry, go ahead. So the judge then becomes sympathetic because she's now relating a lived experience of what it is to be a Black person in apartheid South Africa. She gets empathy from the judge. The children, 6 children are left gone free. I think the others are then given lighter sentences. And then from there on, there's this gratitude that comes from the parents of these children that then revives her spirit, right? Especially the women. She then goes and organizes women in Soweto. They start social clubs for women. They organize them in a way that they even have a treasurer, this and that. And them coming together in their different clubs, they also try to address societal issues at the time. You can understand that these are also Black women that would want to stand against them, but their husbands are also in the cities trying to make a living. They're lucky if they come back in 4 months or in a year. So now they then organize themselves as social clubs, and then we then get to see that the struggles of Black women are not isolated or would not. We should never assume they would not find sympathy. There's a lady called Elizabeth who then comes to South Africa. She's from London, and she said to Ellen, of course, Ellen is very hostile towards her because what is a white woman doing coming to see you? So this Elizabeth said, I'm looking for an organization or a society of Black women led by Black women. And the reason why I'm looking for it is because I was raised by a Black woman myself. She's late now, and I would like to open a trust to assist other Black women. She then comes down to say, okay, so you then realize that as much as women would have assumed that our struggles were only our struggles and not those of superior races because they would not relate, was wrong. And I'm saying it was wrong because, yes, the trust happened, they traveled overseas, they did great things for other Black women and took care of the communities that they existed in. But at some point, they're also approached by an Afrikaner women's club, right? Of course, it's a shock to them to say, you guys are complicit to what's happening to us, right? And they say, look, we want to build a friendship and learn from you guys and understand your plan and how we can best assist. And I think at that point, it then became clear that, look, our struggles were not isolated. And the white women were not necessarily complicit to how Black women lived at the time. So we move away from that, and then we speak about, she then speaks about women as heroines. And this is because, well, she couldn't travel in the early years because she didn't have a passport because of her crimes. But the one time when she also tried to get a passport, she was asked if she doesn't have a son who can give her permission to travel.
Yeah.
She says to this guy, I'm an adult, my son is under my care and he's a minor. He says, I don't care, he must give you permission to travel. And of course, she's humiliated.
She goes home, narrates the story to her son. And the son says, I understand, Mama, and I'm angry. I'm angry because we are under your responsibility, but the system reduces you to this. And then we move on, and then she then speaks about the women that she lived with. And among those would be your Mama Winnie, your Mama Bettina Sisulu, and she pays tribute to them, right? And this is a continuous conversation that we have about the erasure of women. So even in the 80s, she was one of those women that came and recognized the struggles and the strides that other women faced, right? Of course, she narrates the story of Mama Bettina Sisulu falling in love with Dr. Walter, and no one could have ever imagined it. And Winnie Mandela, who has had to be strong because literally every odd is stacked against him. And she also speaks about there's a relative that they started staying with, who went to school now in Johannesburg. He gets arrested. She doesn't know what to do because the prison authorities say only the mother can see this boy. So they travel with a friend, I think, to the northern place to fetch her. She doesn't ask questions. She says, I know they have come to fetch me so that I can go see my son. But she says she was shocked at the composure of that woman to say, she sees her son beaten up, starved, with the apartheid government having done everything possible under the sun to him, but she still composed herself. So she said, I insisted that we share a bedroom so that I can keep an eye on her. But for those 4 days, I was very sleepless because I don't know how she can keep so calm when all the odds are against her. And we are also, okay, so in fact, on the issue of the erasure of women, I also made a note to say, in the year 1984, the ANC's January 8th statement was dedicated to women. It was called the Year of the South African Women, and this was to also recognize the participation of women in the struggle. But I'll also come back to it with the last chapter to say women and men fought side by side, and the fact that the recognition of women should be a continual process because it has begun. She then gets into a conversation on the church, and of course the Black community. She highlights the fact that the church has been very progressive in ensuring that at least women can be educated within these missions. But she also says, look, it was a safe space for us, but the church was also anti-Black because you are met with people that have a particular view about you as a Black person. Why you stay in a shack, how primitive it is that you live the way you do, you behave the way you do, not taking into cognizance the factors that determine or the material conditions that you find yourself in as a Black person in South Africa. So she says, look, the church was progressive to the extent and the fact that it gave women an opportunity to be educated, but it was also anti-Black. They did not understand our traditions. They were anti our idioms. She also speaks about how they satanized Lobola and all these traditions that Black people had, and they were just not willing to learn about Black life. They would just come and impose. As Glenn was saying, you assume this is the blanket approach to something. So that was their conversation and action in that. And then in the last chapter, she speaks about the heading says, Nkosi Africa, God bless South Africa. And then she speaks about how now Black women defied the odds. Of course, she makes an account of the past, the passes, and all the other formations and organizations and events that women did to defy the apartheid system. But in the final chapter, she then speaks of course, the broken society that's led by single mothers now. She speaks about women defying their odds and wanting to now go into the cities themselves to look for jobs. And then she also speaks about
it's taking a village. Mantombi spoke about that. For them, what then happens is that they organize themselves in such a manner that if Mantombi was not around, maybe for a week, her children would be under my care. So there was that understanding among the community that she grew up in, and there was also like a moral fiber that the women tried to instill in society, recognizing that now there's no longer that primal voice of a man to say no to certain things. So you as a woman or you as women are now coming together to say, this is how we're going to lead society. But she also says, and of course, I think a lot of people are guilty of attributing the success of the struggle to men, but it was women who organized it. And she also touches on that to say, look, men and women fought side by side, but essentially it was the women who organized fellow women. You would see in a number of pickets and protests that took place, a number of them had a greater representation of women than they would be men. And this is because women would organize themselves. So we then meet Ellen Kuzwayo, who says, no, it was men and women. And if we are to attribute any success of our freedom or whatever the struggles was to achieve, it should be equally attributed to both men and women as equal participants.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you so much for that. And I think throughout the book, and I love how she actually concludes with that, but throughout the book, we are shown selfless activism by different people. She highlights different men and women and the selfless activism. And I want to go back to the court case that she's talking about, and I want to read what she said. I think there's a certain part that I want to read because I think it speaks to the selflessness that we ought to have. Where she agrees, man, there's a part where she agrees. Okay, I can't find it, but there's a part where she agrees. So you explained she just got released from prison, and 2 months actually, 2 months, she just got released 2 months prior, and she's been asked to testify, and she explicitly writes in the book and explains how this would be detrimental to her. So she explains how it has the potential of getting her in trouble with the authorities and taking her back to jail. Then she refused. She said no, but after the convincing, she eventually said yes. And there's a part where she writes and explains why she said yes. She says it is in the name of the Black child. That's number one. And number two, she says it's also because of her consciousness. So I think for me, it's reflecting on that. Those are two characteristics that we need to adopt. We have a very apathetic youth in this era, in this generation, and I think it is because we don't have that deep conviction for you to say, I will go back. Here she had children, young son, children, and said, because of the Black child, I will take the risk of going back to confinement. Because of my conscience, the information, the knowledge that I have of the reality of Black children, I'm going to do it. And I think we need to look at ourselves. And we are now at the part of the discussion now. And just to open it and say, look, everything that has been said, we need to have also self-reflection as activists today in this moment. What can we draw? What can we learn? And I would like to open up the floor for any questions. And it can be question, it can be input for those who've read the book, reflections also of your pieces that stood out for you. And we are really encouraging everyone to participate, because the more people participate, more perspectives that we have, and the more deeper and enrich our discussion. So I will open up the floor and I will note the first round, then we will come back for a second round. I will note the first round. Anyone? Okay, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we'll start with 4 for now, then we'll come back for a second round. We'll start with you as number 1, then we'll come to number 2, number 3, then number 4 at the back. Yes.
I don't have questions. some comments. Thank you so much for the invite. It's been absolutely amazing, and for the insight and the impact on this and how your take was on the specific chapters that you did this week. So I just sometimes I think some things are spiritually aligned, right? Just yesterday I was writing an article about what we're just discussing now, in terms of how colonialism and apartheid actually tore the fabric of our society as we know it, and destroyed the rule of our nation. And as I was sitting there, I was chilled. I was like, oh my gosh, were these people in my mind yesterday? What is going on? So we have this space, and we have this space to discuss these things, and also to kind of reflect back on ourselves as who have the privilege or who have the opportunity to be in such spaces. Because we really, really need to get to the bottom of that responsibility. It's all great that we say there's crime, there's gender-based violence, there's an unequal society, there's all of this. But what is at the crux of all of that? What is the cause? And I mean, we're having lovely dialogues coming up in a couple of weeks, but if we're not really going to get something, and if I'm comfortable pain and truth, we really are not going to get anywhere. And this book must be part of the curriculum. Really, 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 really. Listen, the thing that we did, and I remember history very, very well. I remember Yakin Vivek, I remember Shigama. But the part about our country, it was just, you know, the formation of the ANC, of the liberation struggle, that did no section on women, no section on what has really, really happened, and then we get stuff, you know, the other pieces of literature that, you know, you really call it like a country and whatever migrant stuff, you know. But I mean, these reflections, true reflections of our people that lived and have documented, really, really need to be they need to be shared, and we need to continue to also support the narrative, you know, guys. It's very important for us to read, because when we don't read, the enemy understands that they're going to get us through the TikToks, through the online, because that's what we can. And if we're not reading, we can't strategize. We can't come together, because it's not about guns anymore. It's about here. It literally is about here. This is your weapon. And if you're not reading, you're equipping yourself. I have to say thank you so
much. I'm also grateful. I saw it's very interesting. I didn't much. So, but I was reading a lot about the panelists were describing. It's like a full spreadsheet. For now, I will start, except she mentioned something like when she passes the man into blame to face. I just wanted to know what taking personal.
No, thank you. Thank you. Then we have Ma.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks, Mantombi, for the invite. Though I did not get a chance to read the book, but at my age, I can relate to the book very well. And I must say, I welcome the insightful presentation from the panelists. Yeah, actually, what stood out for me is when you touched on inferior education. Maybe it's because I am from that space. You know, sometimes it hurts when you hear people saying ANC, ANC in and all that. It hurts to some of us because we know where we come from.
Yeah.
And when you speak of inferior education, believe you me, when I started teaching, I was 19 years old. And I then I had 80 learners in the class. And you know, they be cramped, you know, just it's two learners. During that time, you'll find 4 or 5 sitting in that little space. So that makes me so emotional, and it takes me back. And one thing again I want to talk about is institutionalized crime. Let me tell you, the brutality is still here.
Yeah.
It's just that our people are not conscious enough to see that the system is still there and it's coming by force. I mean, if you open social media, whether TikTok, like you saw, the Facebook, print media, and all that, all you will see is a negativity about Mokhat. And Mokhat also I must tell you, and Lona, you are the people to defend the gains of democracy, because they are out there to reverse it if lesser won. And when we come to Dabaya crime, when we come to Dabaya crime, I want to agree with you to say we need to look at the root cause. We need to look at the root cause. It is still systematized. You know, somebody said, an empty stomach. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Kuzwayo was correct to say at some point, defender crime, because he had a better understanding, the systems, and of which is something that is still happening today. Banabaruna, they are sidelined. The private sector. Remember, the economy is still in their hands, and they are the ones who can make a difference. Government can't employ everyone. Government can't employ everyone. So the private sector has to play a role. And what are they doing now? Sideline, hire illegal foreigners, and then then there are no jobs, joblessness. And they are the first ones to say 60%. Guys, understand them. It speaks to us. Not even me. It talks to you. You know, things to come in this book. Because once angry, GBV, until as long as jobs are not created in this country. And we need not to be apologetic. I mean, let's look at the system now. They fund all these new political parties so that they can divide us as blacks even further. Again, nothing else. Why don't they open factories and fund those black people that are supporting them, that are in their parties? Why don't they support them? Because they know whole economy will come in the hands of the blacks, and at the end of the day, they will be frustrated. So, Lerato who conclude the lessons is that we must remain resilient, we must remain selfless, and continuous activism. Banabaka lona the activist. Give a little warning at 70s. We were there. We were fearless. You know how our bullet we were there. Lona, you fold you on your arms, the more social media, the more in WhatsApp. That's why your activism is. And the country is actually it's gone. It's gone. It's just here. So if Halilo Boyamo, and country e tla mo matsogong a lona ke ka nnete I don't want to lie. I don't want to lie. Many people, my generation and those who came before me, country because we never fought for what we see today. We never fought for what we see today. I mean, we can't have people by hook or crook. They want to be in positions for self-enrichment. And by hook or crook, the positions must be bought. In terms of I nearly used a word, it's not right, but you're not a. But what is and that can be right. And another thing happened, so a young generation, a young lawyer, it's like introspection. This book, I liked it. And I actually invited young people from my ward. You know, I always push them to attend, but understand them, the character. But they want to believe what people must understand the character of the ANC. ANC is not about Hoyaraling, it's not about Helelizo Lama Kosigazi and all that. There is more to that. You know, reading such books, it shouldn't end here. Irona who are here. Let's go read this book and then have this kind of a setup in our wards, in our zones, we can relate to these people in our communities, irrespective whether the person is ANC or not. This relates to the Black community in general.
Number 4, Yaruna.
Thank you very much. Maybe my point of question might be twofold. So from you ladies that have read the book, I have questions. Also, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Nkosi, ABC member of the South African Student Congress. From you ladies that have read the book, what would you say are some of the lessons that you've taken from this book that are most relevant to young women today, given the environment that we find ourselves in the political space and within the ANC? And the second part of the question will be, you guys mentioned that young people are empathetic, that selflessness is not there anymore in activism. How would you guys then say we can go back to that? And for me personally, I feel that we're in an era now where it's performative activism, and it's performative activism that gets awarded only rewarded. It's the people that speak the best in news, the people that sound a particular way or have a particular accent that seem to be getting the attention of government for the right of society. And perhaps this is what's causing some young people to be apathetic. And of course, the fact that we're unemployed, the fact that, yes, in as much as the ANC has done so much, what is happening or what is done by ANC leaders today makes us really question being in the ANC. Perhaps those are some of the reasons why we are so apathetic, because we are not seeing, yes, there are, rewards from democracy that we can see today, things that we can pinpoint to say if there was no democracy, we would not have these things. But we are seeing a reversal of democracy by the very same people that fought for our liberation. So how do we then regain that, or rather do away with that equity that we are facing, or we have to be as young people, and just that level of despondency that is there to not even engage in democratic processes? I think young people do not believe in democracy at all, because young people don't form part of critical policy making. The IDPs that are done by municipalities or whatever the case may be, young people's inputs are not there, and it's because young people are not showing up in those type of tables, or not showing up in those type of gatherings where it's important for policy formulation. So how do we go back to being those, doing away with being empathetic as young people and just getting into or believing more in democracy? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much for that question, and generally the input and the questions which have been placed before us. And I just want to go back to now. In the beginning, you were talking about the education, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because for me it stood out, but I think it can inform as panelists engage with these questions and the comments which have been made. There's a part in the book where Mabuza actually speaks about it. She speaks of, and I think it's in part 2, I'm not sure, one of the chapters in part 2, and she reflects on before the apartheid government, so before the party came in, the level of quality of education that they had. She was speaking about them via university, well, further education, they would go to colleges, they would, and she was listing even people who've been through those good education. And I think that brings now, what for me, context on why 76 was also so historical, is that Black people knew what education was, and that was not it. And that was not it, and it enabled a necessary rebellion and a necessary defiance, because we have tasted, she was even listing, there were lawyers, doctors, Black men and women before this Bantu education and before the apartheid government. Black men and women were highly educated. And I think, going to this question, and I'm going to open up for everyone to give commentary on that, is the issue of consciousness. I think we really need, as activists, if we invest in building consciousness of Black people, or not even just Black activists across the board, I think we were going to see a turnaround in apathy, and also the bravery that Mama, you're talking about, that we little bravery back then. Today, I think if we are really, really conscious, that bravery will automatically also avail itself, because we will understand clearly our generational mission, we will understand clearly what we're trying to achieve. But that is just a reflection on the issue of education. Then I would like to open up to our lovely lady here. I will start with you, Ms. Puleng, then we will come to you, and then Mantombi.
Okay. First, I'd like to appreciate all the inputs, because I think it's important for us to reflect collectively, reflect together, because that's when things come out. I love history because I think it's so important in teaching us to understand where we are right now. Because if we don't take the time to understand and learn history, we always say, we're at the risk of repeating it. And so at the core of the point of education, in the education sector, so I'm also very passionate about education. And Dr. Mandela speaks about, education as being the weapon, the powerful weapon. Yes. And this is, again, why the apartheid regime, as part of their agenda, they went to the education system, understanding its power as well. And it's true, before then, with the missionary education, with the kind of quality education that was there, and Black people being empowered, being educated, and doing so much, there was a lot of thriving in many of the communities. And so when 1948 happened, and also when the homelands were formed, and then you had like South African, then these homelands, and you could see the difference in terms of the resources that were allocated. And this man for Root comes, and then he says, no, scientifically speaking, Black people are inferior. So the education system must also reflect that. We cannot spend the money of the government, it's going to be wasteful because they're inferior. So when you look at per capita, you look at the money, the resources of the state, then you have the white people, the Indian, the colored, the Black people at the bottom. So 1/10 will be given to a Black child. So if you give 100 rand to a white child's education, you're just going to give, a fraction of that, 10 rand to a Black child. So, and this is then what happens, right? This is then what happens. And it limits the level of where Black people could be in terms of education and advancement. Again, it was a systematic process. So even as we understand now, saying how do we engage with these things, we also need to know that it's systems that need to shift for us to see that change. So, and this was meant to dehumanize, right? To dehumanize, because Black people were deemed as less than human. So why would you want to spend money to someone who is less than human? And so it comes from there. And just a quick point before I shut up on my comrade at the back around the lessons learned or that we can learn. I think there's a lot of noise around and there's so many things that are keeping us busy. And I think us being focused and shutting out the noise is very important. Where do we want to go? What is our purpose? Is something that we need to take heed of. Learning from Abu Baba Bet, Abu Mama Bet, who came before us is very important. In the political structures, in the student structures, how are we engaging and how are we learning from each other? One of the things that they did, and I come from a school of thought also where we had debating teams in schools. It's a sad thing that we have lost. Our Tambo, Duve, all of them, they were critical thinkers because they had debating teams, debating societies, where you could sit and critically think about what is happening in society. So this government has introduced this new law. How is it going to impact us? So even as we go and we challenge and we fight the system, we come from an understanding where we've really thought and understood what this is going to mean for us as students. What is this going to mean for our community, and therefore why it's important for us to challenge it? And we don't just go and challenge without really engaging. So that's something that we really need to revisit in terms of saying, how do we do things differently? And also, I think just drawing from Abu Mama Kuzwayo, in issues of consciousness that you spoke about, that is very important because we need to have the consciousness for us to be able to know what is it that is wrong and what is it that we need to do, how we can move forward. So when we speak about radical Black love, what do we mean? When she says, I'm willing to go back to jail because I think about the Black child, I think about the community. And so that's where Mama Machake's idea of killing the spirit of self comes in. That when you kill the spirit of self, then you can think about the Black child. Social media is distracting us. It is very intentionally put in place to distract us. And we spend so much time. There are some useful things, but there is a lot of things that are just wasting our time, the time that we could be using to rebuild our society and do the work that we need to do. The soundbites that are there are distracting us. And it's a system that was put intentionally in place to do exactly that. And I think we also need to be intentional in saying no, we will not allow it. It's very, very important. And we can only do that if we find spaces to keep ourselves through your debating teams, engagements such as this, that actually offer us space and time for us to speak about what it means to build or rebuild. That's what we need to do. Thank you.
Unfortunately, I'm not aware of this. How do we read? How do we how can we utilize all of the men's intention to distract us? How do we use that? Just the same way as these women who use the system where they were innovative and they made money out of it. We need to do the same without it. How can we reclaim that? How can we reclaim that? But yes, we will come to
on the issue of education, I'm covered by and of course, Robert Mugabe said to our education refers to Africa, right? It's because they were out there. But now we do have access to this education as we go. I remember during Christmas, for Tara with the issue of yes, we want pretty quality education, but also want to decolonize. Yes. So then perhaps the question then becomes, Tara graduates from
the conversation then dies about decolonization and the institutions of higher learning. It then becomes the question of how do we revisit the issue of colonization. We do have access to education now, and when we speak about decolonization, of course, it's going to address the issue of consciousness as well, because we would be in essence conscientizing young people. There's a conversation that was had during elections last year to say, how do we encourage young people to vote? They want to vote, right? And there's also a culture of influencership. So because I see the so-called going to vote, I'm going to vote, right? So it then becomes a responsibility amongst ourselves to be model citizens. Antonio Ndlovu was saying the youth of high moral is trained to a job or something. So it means we ourselves must become that which we see in society, so that the next person can then start getting the and on the issue of the lesson that people ask, I think what characterizes the book is the fact that we all have a responsibility towards each other, right? Yes, it takes a village to raise a child, but how do you define that village in the modern day? I would think we need to go to the end of the universe, maybe the 14th, 18th, the 17th years. So, and this is because, look, unfortunately, we are the face of the black oppression, and it has not changed, right? So, because now we have responsibility towards each other, our conversation on the fact that we're the face of the trouble oppression, the fact that whatever social ill in society, it's women and children, unfortunately, that get to bear the brunt. So, my greatest lesson is that we have a responsibility towards each other.
Amen.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. We will come to you.
Okay, so I think I'm covered on the part of the education, especially with what Mabuza speaks to when she refers to the value of education and missionary education. So I think Comrade Puleng has Comrade Puleng has beautifully captured that. But I do think that spaces like this are pockets of power. And I think it is in such spaces that we get the opportunity to critically engage, to shape what some would call discourse. And I think you're quite right, Lerato. The world is becoming more and more digital. Unfortunately, we can't do away with social media. We can't do away, But what I think we're not doing as an organization or as a country is that we're not preparing for the digital world. We're not, and you see it in the way we run, for example, the ANC, we're not preparing for a world that is way more digital, right? And then with regards to my take homes from the book, well, I have many take homes. I think the book covers quite a number of themes, but in the main for me is the issue of selflessness. I really thoroughly loved how Comrade Ellen speaks about where she's saying we should kill the spirit of self. And I think this is one of the reasons why the polarization of this pageantry politics that Kunjani is speaking about, that we lack selflessness in the movement. It's all about me, I did this, and that is not what the ANC is about or what activism is about. Activism should not be tied to any leadership position. But it's unfortunate that now we tie that, our activism is tied to that. It's tied to an event, So I think for me that is my take home is us ensuring that we do the work that we do is not for self, and we must be able to just continuously remind ourselves, the culture enter, and I'm sure some of my colleagues will thank me for this. The culture with my sense of seven, we take a picture. We must know. But see, I'm not a king and I will what. To some extent, I see me, I've just picked up
when we are not genuinely doing the work of the organization and addressing the challenges of our people. And then with regards to the issue, Daniel saying, why was it a grave offense for me passing? It's not necessarily meant, but I'm about indlela esifundiswe ngayo elokishini ukuthi mubona abantu abadala uyabingelela. You can't, for example, smoke in front of abantu abadala. You can't walk with your boyfriend. Those are some of the values that unfortunately have been eroded by the Western culture. You know, the more we adopted Western culture, is the more our African, quote unquote, African cultures or African values. So that's what I meant. These are the little things that shaped who we became as Black young women. That's what I meant by that. So I think I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. And on that of the self. Also, another thing is just that we are running out of time. We are reaching the end now. We are out of time. But so we can't even extensively and talk about this. Is the issue of liberalism.
Yeah.
So how everything in our space, even in the country, you know, there has been this rise of liberalism which has led to the self, you know, so that inward-looking self, you do you, I do me, and I think that is reflected in our activism, that is reflecting in our spaces and the work that we do in these spaces. So I think we also need to address that, but of course that's a lengthy and in-depth conversation which we can't have now. So what I will do, I'm going to try and squeeze in just two short, and the first two, okay. I was squeezing one because it's just three. So it's going to be 1, 2, and 3. Then please let's keep it short because we are really out of time. So if you can keep it short, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. 1, 2, and 3.
Should I start?
Yes.
Okay. Hey guys, believe it or not, I'm a little bit shy. So bear with me. As Lerato has alluded, my name is Segalo. I am me. But I want to speak about, and I also want to highlight that I'm very passionate about the topic of not leaving women out of history, right? And I then wrote my master's, which I'm very proud of. I wrote my master's, trying to keep to 2 minutes. I wrote my master's in titled An Exploration of the Intersections of Gender and Militarism of Women in Umkhonto weSizwe and the South African National Defence Force. So I want us to speak to this idea of institutionalization. So we spoke about crime being institutionalized. We spoke about violence being institutionalized. And I think another thing that has been institutionalized is a lack of care. And we're speaking about caring here, but we're not using the word care. I think that is sort of a key thing that I would have loved for us to explore, but we don't have time. So we speak about women going into the cities, right? And I just want to reflect on that part of history. Women didn't just decide to leave their families behind and leave their children behind and go into the cities. What happened was the men that they were reliant on financially stopped sending back money, right? So that is again a reflection of the institutionalization of the lack of care, right? We see this lack of care. We don't know what's happening to our families back home, but we're going to stop mass sending money. Of course, there might have been constraints there as well that we can explore, but the crux of the matter is that there's no more money to sustain the families back home. So women then decide to go into the cities. But I also want to draw parallels to currently that lack of care. If you know me, you know I hate a deadbeat parent, right? And you can see that from a 1980s period up to 2025, there is a pattern of a lack of care,
Yeah.
where we have men who are not taking care of their children, leaving the homes, leaving the responsibility of raising and caring for the families on women. Women, again, having to leave either their families to go and pursue an education, whatever it may be. So I think what's also been institutionalized is that lack of care, absent parenting, etc. And another thing is alcohol. We spoke about it in the context of Shebeen Queens, which is a more sort of empowering perspective, right? But then another thing that was institutionalized is alcohol abuse, right? Because what happens is that these women identify the economic gap and they fill it. And what does the apartheid government do? They realize that these women are monopolizing the space of Black men and drinking. So they would come back from work, stop at the Shebeen, drink, and the money would circulate in the Black community. So what they then do is that they make it illegal for women to sell this alcohol. And they say that these Black men are only going to be able to buy alcohol from the apartheid government businesses who are being subsidized by the apartheid government. Again, institutionalizing alcohol abuse. Young people, we know what we do to alcohol and it. You can see again, there's a trade, there's a pattern, there are parallels where we can draw from that experience in history and see now what our relationship is as Black people to alcohol. Right? Lastly, another thing that I think another thing that I think has been institutionalized is youth apathy. Right? We speak about it as if it's something that has been happening for the past 10 or even 15 years. It's not. I think systems, and let's talk about the apartheid system, understood the power of young people and understood them as a force against the system itself. So when you see a force of people who are connected, and connection again speaks to community and that selflessness that we are talking about, and you try to break down that particular fabric of society. And I think it's kind of successful because we speak about, I'm gonna do me, I'm gonna do me, you do you, I owe no one anything, blah blah blah. We speak that way, but this is also something that has been reproduced, and it's something that we have inherited. We don't care about one another, and killing the spirit of self. I don't think you can kill the spirit of self when you inherently don't care about people. And I don't think you can be an activist when you don't care about people. We're speaking about people who love positions or whatever, and you think you're joining the political space to get something for yourself. And I think perhaps we are in a cycle where we are going to start spitting out those types of people, and we are going to, and those who remain will be the ones we know actually do care about people. And I think that's what we need to restore, an actual love for people.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Good evening. Thank you for the invite. Please allow me to be there. Kubalulekile ukuthi lo ncwadi thathwe yisho bantwana kubalulekile kakhulu. Why I say so? Ngendlela izinto sezenzeka manje. Believe me, ngo-2030 or ngale, history is South Africa is why I'm saying that EU theatre, let me put it that way. EU theatre, in a the history of South Africa, for example, they don't even know who's everything is for free. Manje yonke into for free sehleli la kubo manje, and by then mayenza lento leyo kwakwenzela ukuwisa umbuso wabontambo likhulu, sorry to use that word. So khona manje ayisasebenzi, everything is free, ayisasebenzi, and bona aba understand ukuthi kwenzakalani. Like Another thing, there's a history. There's a history as a proof. Abantwana bethu abangayazi engicabanga ukuthi fanele ngabe iyabekwa laphaya ukuthi bekwenzakalani kudala. Some of them, they don't even know isikolo zase-Proof why they were called Joslovo, Abokatrada, why bebizwa kanjalo. There's a lot of history ekumele ngabe iyabekwa ifundwe abantwana bayazi. Mina ngikhalela nje ukuthi ngo-20 bani history yethu izobiphelile. Thathani lo ncwadi leyo nise esikolweni, and lastly thina sila sithola kanjani?
Thank you.
I think one of the sections is that thank you for the invite, really, and also just to reflect on what we're making. And it shouldn't be just a book launch, it should be a system to say, when you go back, I'm going to install this, develop this, make it a culture.
Yeah.
As attendants. So I just want to reflect what Ali said is that we all owe to our responsibility, to our own community, to where we are, and our peers. And also the question is, are we actually doing that? As women, as feminists, are we actually being able to say, within the time that you get that here, you even know who's next to you, or you even have that thought to say, before I leave, I'm gonna just network. My sister is a writer, but when we leave here, as we highlighted, is that we lost that touch. We lost that touch to the point that we don't even see value in each other. It could be before leaving, it's either you're gonna go to Puleng because they were in a panelist, but we just in a system where we undermine each other. And must also be conscious to say, within what are we learning and what are we teaching each other? I was very proud that ANC is instilling itself. It's recycling itself, as you say. It's recycling itself to say political education will be becoming a primary understanding of the organization before you can even speak of the organization, because it will speaks to you about the society, what it means about Ubuntu, and what it means and expected of us as the members of the ANC. We find ourselves now calling ourselves within programs like the theme. Does it even speak to the challenge of that community? Is it a need? Is it a need? Do we even have something that we can do sustainable? Why don't you go invest maybe in a book club to say, hey, we're no longer reading any movement? So how about we call, but what you say, because of nowadays this social media, AI has taken over. ChatGPT can just text what I was gonna say here. You don't know how now it comes to a voice to say, they could go say this on this platform. But where we are losing ourselves within the social media, you're right. But how do you convert to use it to our advantage? We need to just ask ourselves and also just to reflect to see, from this session, I'm just giving you guys a task to say, let's go make a change. A pure change to say, from that session I came in on the first, I was able to assist one learner. I was able to assist one students are coming. I was able to assist one to be in grades. I was like, let's task ourselves to be a change. So I wanted to reflect to what Alu said, is that we all have a responsibility to be the will of change. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think, I read the book, man, and I do believe something really shifted. It really changed me. But the discussion, it is I think I would raise appreciation of these discussions are raised. Which is unfortunate that we can't unpack all of them individually, but I think just the depth of what has been put on the table, like I said, with Dunkeld, we have the responsibility now of going to internalize these things, and also how do these things, how can we implement, how do they manifest and find expression in our different and various communities. So thank you all very, very much for that. And I would just like to get, I'm closing because we are out of time. I'd just like to give our ladies here, not even 2 minutes, 1 minute, closing remarks, also speaking to what you have said. What do you think you will go and do differently? Reading this book after these discussions, how do you think, and I know this needs deep reflection, what do you think you'll be able to do differently, even in your workspace, professor, you know, what do you believe you would do differently in our different, when you're in government, what do you think you would go out and do differently, having internalized all of this? And just your overall concluding remarks and what you want to leave. I will start from my right.
Thank you very much. I think taking from the comments on the floor, I think what is almost spoke of, quickly touched me. Also learning about how they call broadening. So there's a part where Mama Ellen Kuzwayo says, when she wrote the book, she was 70. So she says, I tremble at what future South Africa would look like, especially for my grandchildren. And this is the reason why I'm more compelled to fight, so that my grandchildren have lived in a better South Africa than I lived in. So I think that by closing, what am I going to do better in government? I always say I get so excited to see activists in government, because at least now we have an activist public service. So we understand the urgency of services being delivered and the lives of people being changed, transformation being enforced in the various areas of government and essentially our society. So just being a proponent of that.
Sure, thank you.
I think I'm so appreciative of, I think, like you, just the insights that have been shared here today. And I'm going to leave more enriched than I came here. Talking about the spaces where we're in. So I indicated at the beginning that I'm the Chief Albert Lutuli Research Chair at the University of South Africa. And the chair focuses on Ubaba Lutuli's life. But I've been very intentional to also say, Umamnokanya Lutuli. I wonder how many of us even in this room knew who Baba Lutuli's wife is. That her life is also very central in the work that we do. Talking about the husband stopping to send money, I think that's one side of the story. The other side of the story is they relied on postal system. Here's the Baba in Johannesburg, Umama is in the Eastern Cape. So they have to find a way to send money. So they relied on the postal system. And the evil system that it was, the apartheid, who owned the post offices. So sometimes they did send the money. The money never reached Aboma Eka, you know, but she's not going to know that. And one of the things that Mamlokanya Lutuli did, she opened a post office at her house in Guatuguza in Groundville. So she, you know, she went against this. She opened a post office where each and every week people could come and collect their mail. So she managed to do that. It's just one of the many things that this woman has done. We're working on her life. I'm hoping that work will also be prescribed at this course. So this is the kind of work I think that I'm more encouraged today, even more, to go and do even more broadly. To say institutions of higher learning have been central in making sure that the Eurocentric knowledge systems are the ones that are taught. So within the work that I do as a chair, but also as a professor of psychology, how do we teach a psychology that affirms Black lives and Black ways of doing things? Understanding that even the theories that the students are learning, some that are given, the credit is given to someone sitting somewhere in Austria or in Russia, your Freud and them, but to also acknowledge and teach a history that highlights how some of that work was actually stolen from our people. They came here, they explored, they went back, they wrote. And so decolonization is about reclaiming that history. To say African people have been knowers and people who've always thought, people who've always understood the world around them. So learning from here, I'm even more challenged to go back and continue doing that work even more broadly. So thank you.
Yeah, no, ayisifundile. Angifuni ukungasho sifundile, no problem. I've learned so much from the discussions today. It's actually a sad reality that women are the least chronicled in our history, and I think these are some of the things that we need to be very deliberate about. About government, if you are in education or whatever, you must be very deliberate about transforming these spaces. We don't just want to occupy the spaces, but as soon as abantu besifazane noma abantu abasha siyibone transformation kule space abakuzo. So I think for me kule space engikuso but kule space engikuso khona umuntu obuza umbuzo obaluleke kakhulu ukuthi uphume edeclub. One of the challenges in the work that we do as a book club in Moving Spirits is that people do not afford the book. So sometimes it's not necessarily about time of food, but the affordability of the book, the access of this material. So I think that's another thing that we need to be quite deliberate about. In my library, I'm not going to tell you what library, unfortunately. So these are some of the things that we need to be quite deliberate about. And I think these are the challenges that we are trying to address. About one, ensure that our libraries are active. People have access, popularizing our libraries and book clubs. A majority of the people here, and we're very, very deliberate here as a book club to say the conversation must be had. So this is the little thing. And so yes, like we just start learning what is the but also theater space. I would love to see a theater, on theater production on this. I would really love that. So who love online about the space theater center yeah. So thank you very much to the school for this opportunity. I do not take lightly this great opportunity that I've got. And then Fundile Kakulu Siabo.
No, thank you. I'm sorry to hold this space. I just wanted to support what you've just said about performance spaces and theater spaces as a way to broaden it up to the public as well. And I think also through the school as part of the reading, also an invitation also from our side in months to come that as part of doing Mamluk Kanya Rutuli's life, we've actually done exactly what you're saying, a theater production with young people at Everton around her life. And that part is now also part of the history that the kids are taught at school. But also the theater production is a very important space for broader engagement around this work. So an invite will come, and hopefully all of you will come. Yeah, thank you.
Definitely come. No, but thank you so much, ladies. Alu, Puleng, Mantombi, thank you so much. We truly appreciate your insight, and we have reached the end of our discussion for tonight. But that does not conclude what we have said. Let it continue to live in our mind and find expression in our communities. And my closing remarks, and Mr. Ho was telling us about her master's, but I won't tell you my topic because it's a long one. But I just completed my master's and I focused on economic development. So when I read through the book, what stood out for me was consistently, Ellen Kuzwayo, she was very deliberate in showing the women's participation in the economy. In every chapter, every part, she was deliberate in never forgetting to mention the participation of women in the economy. So, my closing remarks actually, and I'm contextualizing that by saying that the part that I'm about to read, it comes after when she began by explaining how men left, then we also ended up going domestic work. Those who were not absorbed in domestic work ended up being queens. But she also mentioned that there were also those who couldn't be absorbed in that. And she also speaks of the high rise of young women joining, being part of participating in crime. So shoplifting. So there was a rise of young women in criminal activity. Yes, she speaks about that in the book. So this part that I'm about to read, it comes after that. So it comes after that. I'll just have to find it. It's page 256. For those who have it. Sorry, page 43. Apologies, 43. Page 43. Yes, it's page 43. So then she acknowledges that yes, there's a reason why institutionalized crime, there's a reason for these things. And she lists barriers and barriers that women are facing and the difficulty during that time. However, and these are my concluding remarks, I will read it out. It says, later in the book, I shall pay my full tribute to the many, many Black women, old and young, who emerged uncorrupted regardless of the obstacles which blocked their way in an effort to make ends meet. The women who have made humble and outstanding remarks in education, industry, commerce, social commitments, trade, sport, and in day-to-day family life. She said, who emerged uncorrupted regardless of the obstacles which blocked their way in an effort to make ends meet. And that is my encouragement to us, is that we all know it's possible. It's possible. And we all know the climate at the moment, corruption, this corruption, that, but she has shown us that with those extreme difficulties that they faced at that time, there were leaders who emerged from that, who went on to lead in industry, to lead in these different sectors, and they remained uncorrupted and they remained resolute to the cause. And I would like to encourage us that in our spaces, let us remain, and corruption is not stealing money only, but corruption is also betraying the cause. Corruption is also moving away from it. So I want us to, when we go back, let's keep that. Let us be counted among those who remain uncorrupted no matter the circumstance. Let us be counted amongst those who remain resolute in the cause, no matter the circumstances, no matter the barrier, no matter the context. That's what I want us to leave here with, to have that conviction for ourselves. Thank you very much. For our final item of the evening, I will have Kifende, who is also with us at OR Campus School, to kind of do closing, and he will also cover the announcements of refreshment and all of that. But from us as a panel, as a team, we want to say thank you, and also from the school side too, we really, really do appreciate your participation this evening. And please, we're waiting for the invite. The invite. Thank you. And also, we will all be in attendance, and we will continue doing this and having these discussions. Thank you very much. We'll call now Comrade Giffen for the closing.
Winnie Mandela. Winnie Ellen very much, comrades. My job is very simple. I was actually hijacked. In fact, I have a bit of clue, but understanding the importance of this gathering, I had to make sure that I'm here as well to support the colleagues who organized the session. And while we were preparing, they said, "Hey, Chana, you do the vote of thanks." So because it's women's man, when they say you go left, you go left. They jump, you ask how hard. So comrades, let me start off by thanking our panelists, Comrade Mantombi, who always avails her time to the school, not only through these programs, but even collaborating with us on some of these initiatives that we do, especially those that have to do with the book review. We truly, truly appreciate, your presence and your support for being with us always, making sure that when we ask for support, we're here. Let me thank Prof. Puleng. Thank you very much. And by the way, she's also a board member. Yeah, she's a board member of us. So I must make sure that I pay proper tribute so that at least I can negotiate for a salary increase. Thank you very much for bringing those powerful insights that you brought. If you were not here, I don't think the conversation would have been as rich as it was. And we congratulate you on the work that you are doing in trying to bring Kanya's life to light. I think it's important. You know, you look at the Americans, they're doing that very well. There are so many biopics of Black American African women and the work that they've done. This year we've had 6888 by Tyler Perry, which is, I think, is a brilliant movie. There's a movie called Hidden Figures about Maria Jackson and the other two women who are brilliant with mathematics. There's Harriet, which speaks about the life of Harriet Tubman. So there's a lot of biopics that they are doing and socializing the history and commercializing it in a progressive way, which allows us to tap into the lives of those women. So we really wish you well and will support that way. Sorry. Oh, it's on YouTube. The documentary. Yeah, we'll do a screening. Comrade Alu, I can't thank you enough. Thank you very much for coming. We actually owe you a book. The last time we did a review on the book by the Chancellor of its University, Dr. Yes. Equal but different. Yes. So we still have your book and we'll give it to you. I'm not sure what she had organized. Maybe I'm putting it. Yeah. But thank you very much also for coming through and availing your time. We truly appreciate that. I think this was a very dynamic panel, which brought different insights, which enriched the conversation in a way that's empowering, but also instructive in a way that we have to go back and share these lessons with others that are not here. I like the quote that you drew on, Comrade Mantombi, where Mam Charlotte Matleke in part says, this work is not for yourselves. Yes. Remove the spirit of self. And if you can rise, bring someone along with. Personally, that quote has carried me a long way. Some of the work that I've done, community-based work, was informed by that particular quote. Lerato, thank you very much for steering the ship the way you did. I don't think we would have been able to unearth the kind of substance that we were able to unearth if it wasn't for you steering the ship in the way that you did. To all of you, thank you very much, especially those of you who contributed to the conversations. People with masters, also more like, organizers, Jacob brings in a whole body of people every time. And really out of the passion of this work. He's an activist, he does this work almost on a daily basis. Thank you to all of you. I see my people from Ndlovu. Thank you very much. Yes, I don't know. I'm coming. So my comrades from Ndlovu, there's a branch there called Morogoro branch that work closely with. Actually, we did a screening with them as part of our work. It was led by our comrade. Thank you very much, comrades, for coming. Comrade Tuto, thank you very much. Yeah. Don't worry. You see, now you are busy with No, comrade Tuto, thank you for coming. We note your presence because it means that SASCO is well represented and so comrades of SASCO as well coming in. So we really appreciate the fact that we are blessed by the presence of even the NEC of SASCO. We are just trying to create an avenue and really create a template to say, comrades, activism is possible. Yeah. And you don't need to move mountains. It's the small acts. Yeah. Comrades from Tswane, thank you very much. But it's good, it's part of learning. We really appreciate the effort you've taken going through the traffic. I know the traffic to get here is quite hectic, so we really appreciate it. Comrades Sakele, can't thank you enough. In fact, she's the brainchild behind this. She's the one who's running the book club. FBS for always hosting us. I think it's kind of poetic that we're speaking about a powerful woman who's also unearthing other powerful women in a space named Lindiwe Mabuza, who's also a very powerful woman. And if you want to see how powerful Mabuza was, for those of us who are members of the African National Congress and part of its broader movement, I would implore you to go and watch a documentary of the 1991 conference in Durban and go and see how Mabuza and Mamruk First were leading the charge for 40% quota women. It almost collapsed conference. But you must go see that to see how those women were able to practicalize their ideas and were able to always advocate them. I want to end off by saying this, comrades, before I mention issues of I know the food smells nuts. So there's a couple of things that I want to end off, and I'll start here from the Women Charter, which I believe informed the Freedom Charter. And when we talk about the Freedom Charter, we don't unearth this point. But in fact, the Women Charter preceded and informed the Freedom Charter. As we all know, this year was celebrating 70 years of the Freedom Charter. Yeah. But I think for you to grasp what the Freedom Charter is underlying philosophy, you must go and engage the Women Charter. And this is the preamble and the first clause, which I think are quite powerful. It says, we, the women of South Africa, wives and mothers, working women and housewives, African, Indians, European, and colored, hereby declare our aim for striving for the removal of all laws, regulations, conventions, and customs that discriminate against us as women and that deprive us in a way of our inherent right to the advantages, responsibilities, and opportunities of the society that the society offers to any one section of the population. We women do not form a society separate from men. This is only one society. There is only one society, and it is made up of both women and men. As women, we share the problems and anxieties of our men and join hands with them to remove social ills and obstacles to progress. That sense of solidarity, for me, it tops any kind of conviction that you can find from activists. From all of that suffering that was spoken about, which was inflicted by even black men at that time, they were able to say, no, but this society is not ours alone. We extend solidarity to our men. And I think it's a rallying call to us men today to say, we need to also extend our hand. When women say, comrades, please join hands with us to fight this demon called gender-based violence, we did not feel like it's an attack. If they could, at the bleakest of our moment of history in society, say, we believe in a society where it's not just about us, but women. So I think in reverse, it's a rallying call to us men. And we need to interrogate ourselves. And I'm glad it's young people who are here. You know, we need to interrogate ourselves. Interrogate how you do your relationship. Interrogate how you relate with your women comrades. Interrogate how you relate with your sisters, how you relate with your mother. Because if we don't take that first step, unfortunately, we are not assisting society. I think one of the things that have been proven is that you can't have full potential socio-economic growth of society by oppressing a people, whether based on race, whether based on gender. If we want to unlock the full potential of South Africa, we need to be serious about empowering and creating equal opportunities for women. We should not do it as a charity case. It's a necessity. Otherwise, even if everything was to go well, you remove the corruption, but you still oppress women, you will only reach those 0 point something economic growth. But once you unlock the potential of women, you will see economic growth really growing at a very fast rate. Maybe to end off by emphasizing this point. Part of the reason, Lerato, why we don't see growth enough in South Africa is because we are refusing to formalize the informal sector, which women participate in. Most of us here, or some of us, have grown this much because our mothers were participating actively in the informal economy. So I'm just saying these points to show you that we owe it to ourselves to ensure that women have equal opportunity. Otherwise, we are doomed. So with that being said, comrades, there's food at the back. Okay. And then I'll give back to our program director. As the World Campus School of Leadership, we are really, really grateful for the support you keep showing us. This book club is something that we want you guys to go and replicate in your communities.
Yeah.
We are even willing to come and support you, whether it's through borrowing you books in your study circles, assisting you host sessions like this. But we can only extend ourselves through you. Maybe we can't reach your community, but through you, we can actually reach it. So let's go out there and replicate this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kipens. And I made a slight mistake. I forgot that no, we do have books up for grabs. So I'm going to let Lisa here handle that process. We have a little competition and we do have a few books available, and she'll just administer that how we can get that out. But overall, thank you. Thank you very much. This will be the last one.
Thank you for listening to what we go and get refreshments. I know that most of us here did not read the book because we didn't have access to it. And for those who have the book, okay, firstly, you can get the books from through me, not from me, but through me. I can assist with that. My number is on the poster that we shared. My email address is also there. So we were running a competition, but I think we didn't really publicize it as much as we should have. So there are people who submitted written reviews, but I would like to extend the due date for written reviews to the end of the month because we're still within the women's month. So if you need the book, please contact me. But I think I'll speak on behalf of Mantombi and say that with regards to Soweto people, I'll engage with Mantombi. She'll assist me to see how many people would like the book. And please, I'm emphasizing on this. If you're gonna take the book, read it, send us the review so that we know that we're not just giving people books and we just so with the competition that we're running, firstly, it's actually two parts. First part is to give back to a school. If you have a school that you know of that you wanna compete on behalf of, please write the review, send it to us, and we will maybe select that school. Come to your school, give out 20 pairs of school shoes as well as sanitary pads for girls in high school or primary. It's fine. The second part was, I'm saying was because the competition was running throughout, is the part where we select one or two people that we're going to give metric dance outfits to. So please, if you have somebody that you think needs this, write that review, compete on their behalf, and we'll definitely deliver. Thank you so much. Oh, then we go into